first speaker is Kate Fernie, the current operations manager of CARARE, who is doing important work with the dissemination of cultural heritage 3D models, also via Europeana Pro and Share 3D. Kate, the stage is yours. Please.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me today. And I'm just looking for my PowerPoint presentation, which is hiding at the moment. So if you'll just give me a minute. So my presentation is going to be wholly in English. So I'm sorry. I've enjoyed listening to you speaking to each other in Finnish, but I hope you don't mind me presenting in English because that is my only language, my only chance of speaking to you today. Now, I hope that the share screen will work. Great. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. Can you see the second slide?
Yes.
Great. I tried this earlier in the week and the slides didn't move from one to the next. So just a little bit, I'll begin by giving a little bit of background about Karari. We're a non-profit membership association and we focus on advancing professional practice and fostering appreciation of the digital, archaeological and architectural heritage. Our members include national heritage agencies, archaeological, digital archives, research teams specialised in archaeology, and also companies and university spin-off groups who specialised in 3D digitisation. So in fact, across our membership, there's a lot of activity around digitisation of the cultural heritage in 3D and creating 3D content for various organisations. We've been active since 2011, so we've seen quite a lot of developments in 3D over that time and have built up quite a lot of experience around it, not only its creation, but the issues around sharing that form of content. And 3D has become increasingly valuable for the cultural heritage. It's used for conservation of archaeological sites and historic buildings, in research projects. It's widely used in education, in tourism, and all kinds of applications from the creative industries and others. It's very important for documenting heritage at risk, whether that's for the conservation of small museum objects or the large type of monument that you see in the slide, in the image on the slide. It's really useful for providing access to heritage in places that are hard to get to, or providing access for people who can't necessarily visit those places. It opens up the cultural heritage to new audiences and creates possibilities to engage with people from all different types of backgrounds. So it's a great thing, it's very valuable. It's not without complexities, and I'm sure the speakers later today will talk more about the practicalities of creating 3D. It's used on assets of very different size and scale, from very small objects to very large monuments, and obviously the situation or the type of asset that's being digitized, whether it needs to be digitized outdoors or inside, affects the methods and techniques and the workflow that's used in capturing the object itself. If you're interested in the materials and in conservation, you may start using techniques that allow you to see the internal structure of the object, more scientific scanning methods. But it's not only the object itself, it's also the audience that affects how you capture the content and the type of information that you need to capture and at what quality you capture that information. People often talk about the process of creating 3D. It's quite an elaborate process. There are a lot of steps. You have to think about the techniques that you're going to use on site to capture your content itself. It goes through a lot of processing stages where you're cleaning, checking, optimizing, improving, enhancing, enriching your content. You may go through modelling stages, stages where you're animating the model, you're thinking about how it behaves in response to actors. You could be adding annotations or linking your content to other documents. So it's an elaborate process, and it's entirely understandable why people talk a lot about that process. There are all kinds of issues that you need to consider, from the historical accuracy of your content to its technical quality. But when it comes to sharing and preserving the 3D, there are some specific aspects that are important and which are less discussed. So the standards that you follow and the file formats that you choose can help if you want to share your content and keep it for the future. It's important to capture metadata for the content and for the process that you've gone through in creating it. And it's really important to clear the rights in the content itself and the content that you're creating, and then to think about licensing it to allow for access and to allow for preservation in the future. There are quite a varied range of different outputs from a 3D project, and I really thank Anuka for sharing her file structure, because that illustrated very nicely just the number of different files and documents that are created in a 3D project. There can be quite a lot of text documents or related archival materials which can be linked to a 3D model as well. So whatever you're doing in terms of sharing the content and providing access to it, you will have an archive that you're creating of the full data set with large numbers of different files in it, which you need to think about preserving and depositing. From that archive and from the work that you do on capturing the shape and the textures and the appearance of your object, you can create different versions of the 3D model to publish in different ways. I've said here to publish at different resolutions online. So you can share a higher resolution version for research, or a lighter weight one for education, or you can create a model which is suitable for printing. You might want to use your content in galleries to create visitor experiences and visitor interactives or guides. So there are a lot of different outputs that you could be creating from your project, and a lot of means of access, a lot of possibilities there. Until quite recently, actually providing access to 3D content online was considered to be an unsolved problem. The files were huge, they were vast, they were very heavy. You could wait for ages to download the content, and sometimes you had to download and install plugins so that you could view it. So you didn't really know what you were getting until you'd committed quite a lot of effort and computing time to actually see the content. But there was a revolution really in terms of access to 3D 5 or more years ago with the advent of HTML5 and WebGL. It became possible to stream 3D content in real time. So you could provide access to detailed models that would appear for users online, so that they could see them, they could interact with them without having to wait for ages and without having to go through this whole download process. these days 3D content can be made accessible on all kinds of devices, so you can see it more or less as easily on your mobile phone as you can see it on a web browser. So this revolution brought about projects to offer viewers for content. The Sketchfab is a commercial initiative, but it uses WebGL and HTML5, uses those technologies to allow it to offer that access. The Smithsonian's project's been mentioned earlier on. And there's also other initiatives like 3D Hop, but there are viewers that allow you to look at point clouds and different kinds of 3D object on an online platform, which simply didn't exist 5 years ago. I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that we've done looking at the ways of improving the sharing of content that people are uploading to Sketchfab with the Europeana platform. We looked at Sketchfab because it's become quite a popular platform amongst cultural heritage institutions. It has quite a big user community. It's quite lively. There's a good forum. People can talk to each other, get a lot of help about the processes that they're going through, and it's quite widely used. So it's a good way of disseminating your 3D content. And we wanted to kind of increase that dissemination and to see more 3D cultural content becoming visible in Europeana. So in the Share 3D project, which just ran for 18 months, so it's quite a short project, we created a metadata capture tool to allow cultural heritage institutions who are uploading their 3D on Sketchfab to share that content with Europeana easily. We developed guidelines on the tools and also on the 3D workflow, and also a story making tool to allow for the reuse of that content. I'm just going to focus on the metadata aspect, and you can mention metadata earlier. And the problem really with 3D content and metadata is there's not very much metadata available. The content's often created by specialists working in laboratories, and the metadata is created separately later on in the process. There aren't very many tools available to actually create structured metadata, so people have often been using quite simple methods and spreadsheets and focusing on the technical aspect of the object, which doesn't necessarily give a platform like Europeana the information it needs about the cultural heritage asset itself that's represented in the model. So we need more metadata for 3D, and we need better metadata, both to understand the content and how it was created, and also the cultural heritage that has been captured within that model. It's useful for discovering the content in the first place, and it's necessary for preservation and archiving of that content. So what we did was we developed a dashboard, which actually I've illustrated it better in the previous slide. So you can see that the dashboard is online, it's cloud-based. Anyone can register an account to use it. You can link it to your Sketchfab account, and when you link it, you've got the opportunity to choose 3D models from your Sketchfab account and capture the metadata that you've generated in Sketchfab for those models and import it into the Share 3D dashboard. So it captures any text that you've written, any tags that you've added during the upload process, some of the technical aspects of the metadata that Sketchfab produces in the upload process, and importantly, the links to the object object where it's online and links to thumbnails depicting that object. Once you've imported the metadata from Sketchfab, you then have a tool which allows you to add more detailed metadata for Europeana, but we've aimed to make it as easy as possible to do that. So we've got pick lists where you can type into and you can select your subject keywords, your periods, names, you can enter dates. There's a very simple map search where you can enter the place name, then drag and drop the pin for the location of the object and capture the coordinates for that place so that it goes into the metadata. And then the tool generates an EDM, a Europeana formatted record. So it's an XML record in EDM format, which we provide to Europeana for ingestion, so that your content is then published on the Europeana platform. The main difference between our capture tool and Europeana's model at the moment is that we included a section for the paradata about the model creation process. So there's a tab which is called Model Creation, where you can enter some information about and keywords about the processes that you've used in generating that model, when you created it, who you created it, who created it, and how that process went. We have to we integrate that in the Europeana record under the provenance element at the moment, but it's possible that that may change as Europeana is looking into the implementation of a new event element to its data model at the present time. But we felt that it was important to respect the 3D process and make sure that that paradata was covered in our capture tool. So once we have the metadata, we can share the content, and in this way Share3D has been increasing the amount of 3D content that's accessible within Europeana. Europeana has implemented Sketchfab Viewer, so it can be rendered dynamically within the Europeana platform. I'm not really sure how familiar you all are with Europeana itself, so this is a very quick overview. Out of the 50 million items that you can find in Europeana, the vast majority are images and text documents. There are some movies and some sound files, but the vast majority are images and text documents. And at the moment, there are only around 20,000 3D models. We would really like to see that content grow. But there are some challenges. There are challenges for Europeana, but there are challenges for actually any platform that wants to provide access to 3D content. People are very used these days to being able to see content immediately on the web. So if you go to a social media platform and there's a video, it plays automatically. You don't have to do anything. Images and text documents are easy to render. It's more complicated with video and audio files, but there are standard formats and there are technologies which can be embeddable to smooth the path to online delivery. The problem with 3D is it's less well standardized. There are more than 50 formats that are in use. So platforms like the Smithsonian for one, but also Sketchfab, but any institution that's looking at integrating 3D content immediately finds that its users are generating their 3D in a vast number of different formats, which complicates the process in terms of ingestion and rendering that content online. Some of those formats can play immediately on a web platform, but many of them don't. And so you get a kind of varying experience for users when they come to an online platform. The worst case really is you can see something where there's like a grey icon. You don't really know what the content is. You don't have a snapshot of it. Maybe you have to commit to a download before you can even get an idea of what that content is going to be. So it's not very appealing, and it's not what we're used to these days. Sometimes you get a preview of the content so that you've got an idea of what the subject of the model is when you come to it online, but you still have to download it to activate it. And sometimes you're getting a model that you can actually interact with. So you can use your mouse, you can rotate the model, you can zoom into it, and you can really begin to enjoy it. And then there are other services which allow you additional tools where you can actually measure the size of the object and do comparisons and look at the content in a more scientific way. In terms of the user experience, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the different types of content that people are creating. So you may be digitizing a fairly simple object, which is more or less a small round object, but you want to allow users to explore that object from all sides, to zoom in on the details. It's nice if you can create views so people can easily go to see different details on that object. You can zoom in on the left side, the right side, the top, and so on. And it's quite a simple user experience. This particular object is made available in a 3D PDF. The content works nicely, but these days when you come to 3D PDFs online, you often find you need to download them, and then you have to click on the file to activate the content. So you don't really know what you're getting until you've actually committed to this download and click process, and there can be some security issues around that. So we're not recommending 3D PDF for new content these days. You can get this effect of being able to rotate and inspect your 3D model using a platform like Sketchfab, but other platforms as well. You might have a more complicated object. This is a castle in Spain. It's been captured in high resolution, and a version of that model has been made available on Sketchfab. It's used in tourism materials for this particular monument. And you can see that the organisation that created the content has annotated it. So you can move yourself around the model, following the annotations, viewing interiors, and getting more historical information about the particular features at those points on the model. So you begin to get a richer experience of the content. It's published via Sketchfab. This particular model has quite a large number of polygons, so it is quite a rich, it's quite a detailed model, but there are higher resolution versions of it available also offline. The previous example was something which represents a cultural heritage object in its current condition, but often we're talking to people who are making visualizations of an object or a monument at a moment in time in the past. This is a monastery site in Belgium which currently survives as earthworks. There are no built remains at all on the site. So this is a visualization of the monastery at a moment in its history. And again, it allows you to explore the scene. You can follow a guide around the site. In this case, this is actually, it's also made available as a gallery interactive, and you can navigate your way around the site using hand gestures. It's available online, but also in gallery as well. I just want to talk a little bit about the possibilities. Obviously, in Europeana, what we're making available is the online version of the content. I focused on Europeana's use cases and some of the issues that it's contending with in addressing its broad public audience in terms of making 3D available. And I've spoken quite a bit about Sketchfab, but obviously there are other projects, there are other ways of publishing 3D content online. Scan the World focuses on 3D printable models. Inception is a project which is looking at historic building information systems, so quite rich captures of historic buildings for mainly for conservation reasons. 3D Hop is more of a research use case, and I just wanted to include the research cases to just give a broader picture of the 3D scene. This is an example. This is some work that's been done by the Dark Lab at Lund University, where they're using, they have a 3D digitization program going in collaboration with the museum at the university and other museums within the district. And they're using it to create a virtual reference collection, which is powered by 3D Hop and 3D Web Archives underneath. And in these COVID-ridden times, it's quite popular. It's being used as a teaching tool for students that aren't currently able to visit university collections as much as they would normally do. Because 3D Hop offers a more technical type of tool, you can look at the object, but you can also begin to take measurements of different on that object, and the tool allows you to build up a collection so that you can compare different examples of the same type of object within the collections environment provided by Lund. So it's an interesting application of 3D. The Ariadne Plus project is also looking at the development of researcher tools. The visual media services that it develops provides a tool for the upload of 3D models, which is based on 3D Hop, and again offers these measurement and other tools for the models. This is a research initiative, and actually it's a proof of concept. The visual media service isn't intended as a permanent archive or repository service. It's so people can actually look at the possibilities and see what type of service they might want to generate. And I wanted to mention publishing. As I speak with academics, I became aware that this Taylor and Francis had started offering a facility to allow authors to include embed models from Sketchfab within their articles. I'm sure there are other journals offering a similar service. I'm only highlighting Taylor and Francis because this is the one that I've come across. I'd be interested to know if there are other similar use cases that exist. But I think it's important to know that when you enter into a 3D project, that you have a lot of opportunity to make the most of the content that you're generating. a lot of this content, it takes weeks or even months of work to actually generate a 3D model of a huge castle like the one that I illustrated in Spain. So it's important to know that you can maximize the results that you're creating. I would say, I hope everyone who's creating 3D content wants it to be easily findable, accessible, interoperable with different systems and ready for reuse. It's worth thinking about. I wanted to end really by summing up how we might make this work for cultural heritage, and how we might move towards fair data management. So when we think about findability, you need to remember to create good metadata records, to use unique identifiers, to think about using controlled vocabularies and international vocabularies that will allow your content to be discovered. If you want it to be accessible, it's a good idea to use the common file formats that mean your content can be delivered, accessed and preserved easily by different platforms. Remember, even if we talk a lot about dissemination platforms like Sketchfab, it's important to deposit your archive so that it can be preserved as well as publishing it. If you want it to be interoperable, then use formats, platforms and systems that can be supported by cultural institutions and their users. Sometimes it's a good idea to follow standards rather than to lead or be at the cutting edge, because it can make your content more easier to make it accessible. But interoperability is not only about interoperability with platforms, it's about the fact that when you create 3D content, you may want to make connections between that content and 2D images and documents. You may want to include sounds and other media to relate it to your model. And if you want the content to be reusable, it's really important to think about, go through the process of clearing the rights. Sometimes there can be rights in the cultural heritage object that's being digitized. There will be rights that are created as the digital content is produced. So you need to make sure that those rights are understood and that you have a license in place that allows for reuse and also preservation of the content. It's hard to preserve content unless the rights situation is clear. Thanks for your attention. I've included in this set of slides, I've included some references, and I've included a summary of the principles and tips for 3D digitization that have been published by the EC Expert Group on Digital Cultural Heritage. So I'll make the slides available to you so that you have access to the references. But for now, I just wanted to say thank you and to ask if anyone has any questions.